Stanley did not understand this new game. It was not like the game he played with his friends and classmates at school, but Auntie Ada told him he will understand it soon and to keep it to himself. Stanley was just 10 years old. He loved football and reading storybooks. He was a cheerful boy who always smiled at school. But when school ended and the bus dropped him at home, something was not right. Stanley's house was often empty. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Paul, were both bankers. They worked hard to give Stanley a good life. Every day, the school bus dropped. Stanley at their door at 3 p.m., but the house stayed quiet until 7 p.m. when his parents came back from work. Sometimes Stanley played by himself in the living room. Sometimes he sat by the window watching the sun go down. He liked football and reading stories, but he missed having someone to talk to. One evening, Stanley told his parents, "I don't like being alone every day." His mother smiled gently. "We are sorry, Stanley. We have to work hard for you. It's just for a few hours." His father nodded. "We want to give you the best life." Stanley understood, but deep inside, he wished his parents had more time for him. He wanted them to come home earlier. One day, his mother had an idea. "Stanley, Auntie Ada next door can look after you after school." Auntie Ada was their neighbor. She was a kind young woman in her early 30s. She lived alone and was friendly to Stanley. Sometimes she bought him snacks. His parents trusted her. Stanley agreed. He was happy to have someone to spend time with. The next day after school, Stanley went to Auntie Ada's apartment. It was a small one-bedroom flat next door. Auntie Ada welcomed him with a warm smile. "Hello, Stanley." "Come inside," she said cheerfully. She gave him a plate of snacks and helped him with his homework. Stanley liked how kind she was. She even gave him a new football and some small toys. Every day, Stanley spent time at Auntie Ada's place after school. They played games, read stories, and laughed a lot. Stanley began to feel happier. Auntie Ada was always friendly. She told him stories and taught him new things. Stanley thought he had found a new friend. One evening, after Stanley finished his homework, Auntie Ada sat close to him on the couch. "Stanley," she said softly, "let's play a special game. It's just for us. Don't tell anyone, okay?" Stanley was not sure. He did not understand what kind of game it was. But Auntie Ada smiled kindly, so he thought it would be fun. He agreed and followed her instructions. But as the game began, Stanley started to feel uncomfortable inside. Something did not feel right. He wanted to stop, but Auntie Ada told him to keep playing. Stanley's heart beat faster. He felt scared, but he did not know what to do. Stanley sat on the soft couch in Auntie Ada's apartment, holding his new toy car. The small room was quiet. Only the humming of the standing fan filled the space. Auntie Ada sat beside him closer than usual. "Stanley," she said, her voice low but sweet, "you're a very special boy. You know that, right?" He smiled shyly and nodded. "Yes, Ma." She reached out and touched his hair gently. "You're smart and handsome. You deserve a special friend like me." Stanley wasn't sure what to say. He liked being praised. He liked when adults noticed him. But something about the way she said it made him feel strange, like a small stone was rolling in his stomach. "Let's play that special game again," she said, picking up a cushion and placing it behind him. Stanley looked at her. "Can we just play ball outside?" he asked hopefully. "No," she said with a soft laugh. "This game is just for us, remember? It's a secret game." She leaned closer and her hand brushed against his leg. Stanley looked away. He didn't understand what the game was really about, but he knew he didn't like it. His chest felt tight, and his small fingers clenched the edge of the couch. "I want to go home," he said quietly. Auntie Ada smiled, but didn't move away. "Don't be shy, Stanley. It's okay. It's just play. And remember, don't tell anyone. It's our little secret." Her voice was still soft, still sweet, but it no longer sounded safe. Stanley didn't speak again. He sat still like a rock, trying to keep his tears from falling. His heart beat fast in his chest like a drum. When the clock struck 6:45 p.m., he heard the familiar sound of his parents' car outside. He quickly stood up. "Time to go," he said, picking up his school bag quickly. Auntie Ada touched his arm. "Remember, no one needs to know. You don't want me to get into trouble, do you?" Stanley shook his head. He ran out the door and into his own house without looking back. That night at dinner, Stanley couldn't eat much. His rice stayed cold on the plate. His mother asked, "Are you okay, darling?" "I'm tired," he said. His parents didn't press further. They were used to long days and quiet dinners. After all, Stanley was a calm boy. But tonight, he wasn't calm inside. His thoughts raced like thunder. He didn't know what to do. He just knew that something was very wrong. The next day at school, Stanley didn't laugh as much. He didn't run around during break time or chase the ball like he used to. He just sat alone under the mango tree, holding his water bottle and staring at the ground. His best friend Musa walked up to him. "Stanley, you know well?" he asked. "I'm okay," Stanley replied quickly. "Are you upset?" Musa asked again, this time lowering his voice. Stanley shook his head and forced a small smile. "I just don't feel like playing today." Musa sat beside him. They were in primary 5 and usually talked about cartoons, football, and who was the best in class. But today, Stanley didn't want to talk, not about anything fun. The bell rang. It was time to go back to class. Stanley stood slowly and walked behind the line of pupils. When school closed and the bus dropped him off, Auntie Ada was already outside, waiting. "Hello, Stanley," she said brightly, holding a small pack of biscuits. "Come inside. I got your favorite." Stanley stood still for a few seconds. He looked at her, then at his house. He thought about pretending to be sick. He thought about saying he had extra homework, but he couldn't find the words. His feet just moved, and he followed her in. That evening, Auntie Ada didn't play any strange games. She just gave him food, helped with his maths homework, and let him watch cartoons. But Stanley still didn't feel okay. His stomach felt tight the whole time. He was always waiting for something bad to happen again. He started avoiding her eyes. When she smiled at him, he looked away. When she called his name, he answered quickly but softly. At home, Stanley stopped talking as much. He no longer told his parents about his day. His stories became short. His answers became one-word replies. "Did you eat today?" his dad would ask. "Yes." "Did you play with Auntie Ada?" "No." His parents were tired after work. They noticed the change, but thought maybe he was just growing up or tired from school. One day, Stanley woke up with a headache. He sat on his bed for a long time, holding his knees. He didn't want to go next door. He didn't want to play any special games ever again, but he was afraid. What if Auntie Ada got angry? What if she told his parents something that made them stop trusting him? He didn't want to cause problems. He didn't want to be the reason someone got in trouble, so he stayed quiet. But the silence grew heavy. It followed him like a shadow. Even in class, he found it hard to concentrate. He started failing spelling tests. He forgot how to laugh. He forgot how to feel safe. Musa asked him again one day, "Are you mad at me?" Stanley finally shook his head and whispered, "No, I am just thinking." Musa looked at him and nodded slowly. "Okay, if you want to talk, I am here." That small offer sat in Stanley's heart like a tiny light. Maybe one day he would speak. Stanley stared out the window of the school bus, his cheek pressed against the glass. The streets rushed by, trees, shops, people, but he didn't really see them. His mind was somewhere else. Stanley wanted to turn and run. He wanted to shout, "No! I don't want to come in!" But instead, he nodded slowly and walked toward her door, like he was being pulled by something he couldn't fight. As they entered the apartment, everything looked the same. Same small curtains, same red plastic table, same soft rug. But it no longer felt safe. He sat on the edge of the couch. "Do you want to watch cartoons or eat first?" Auntie Ada asked, setting down a plate. "Cartoons," he mumbled. She turned on the TV and sat beside him. "You're quiet today," she said. "Are you okay?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, Ma." "Good. You know you can tell me anything, right?" she said, placing her hand lightly on his shoulder. Stanley felt his chest tighten. He kept his eyes on the screen, though he wasn't watching. The cartoon characters moved and talked, but the words didn't enter his ears. After dinner and homework, his parents arrived home. He rushed out before Auntie Ada could say goodbye. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling in the dark. His parents' room was down the hall, the sound of their quiet talking echoing faintly. He thought of telling them, but then he remembered how tired they always looked, how they always said, "We're doing this for you." Would they believe him? Would they think he was lying? Would they still trust Auntie Ada? Stanley turned to the wall and squeezed his eyes shut. The silence in the room felt like a heavy blanket. The following day was Saturday. There was no school, and Stanley stayed in his pajamas longer than usual. He sat in the living room, flipping through one of his favorite storybooks, but his eyes were not reading. His mother came out of the kitchen and placed a bowl of cereal in front of him. "Eat, darling," she said with a tired smile. "We're going to work soon." Stanley didn't touch the spoon. "Can I go with you?" he asked softly. She looked at him in surprise. "To the office?" He nodded. She knelt beside him. "Why, sweetie? You'll be so bored. There's nothing to do there. I just don't want to stay home." His father walked in, already dressed for work. "What's wrong, Stanley?" he asked. Stanley looked down. He bit his lip, trying not to cry. "Nothing. I just don't want to stay with Auntie Ada today." Both parents exchanged a glance. "Did something happen?" his father asked carefully. Stanley didn't speak. His mother placed her hand gently under his chin. "Stanley, it's very important that you tell us the truth. If there's something bothering you, we need to know." He shook his head quickly, still avoiding her eyes. "She didn't beat me," he whispered. "She's nice, but I just don't want to go there anymore." His father sat down slowly. "Are you sure she didn't do anything to hurt you?" Stanley's silence answered them. His mother put her arms around him and hugged him tightly. "It's okay. You don't have to go back there, okay?" "Okay," he said, and for the first time in days, a tear rolled down his cheek. They didn't push him to say more. That day, they took him along to their office. He sat quietly beside his mother's desk, drawing on white paper with colored pencils she gave him. He still didn't smile, but for once he didn't feel afraid. In the following days, they arranged for a young cousin to stay with them after school. Her name was Chica, and she was 15. She helped Stanley with homework and played board games with him. Still, something remained broken inside. One night, his mother came to his room and sat beside him on the bed. "Stanley," she said gently, "can I ask you something?" He nodded. "What did Auntie Ada do that made you so scared?" Stanley looked at her, eyes wide and watery. "She said we were playing a game," he whispered. "But it wasn't a game. She told me not to tell anyone. She touched me." His mother's face changed slowly, like a cloud covering the sun. She held him close, her voice shaking. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Stanley. I'm so sorry." She stayed with him all night, and the next morning everything changed. The next day, Stanley's parents did something they had never done before. They both stayed home from work. They made breakfast together, yam and eggs just the way Stanley liked it. They sat at the table as a family. There were no laptops, no office calls, no rushing out the door. Stanley didn't say much, but just having his parents close made his small heart feel a little safer. After breakfast, they took him to see someone. She was a calm, kind-looking woman who worked in a quiet office. Her name was Mrs. Grace, and she was a child counselor. Stanley sat across from her holding a toy she gave him, a small brown bear. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Mrs. Grace said gently. "You're safe here, and no one is angry with you." Stanley glanced at his parents, who smiled at him with encouragement. I didn't like the game," he said finally. Mrs. Grace nodded slowly. "You're very brave for telling us that. That game was not okay, Stanley. What happened to you was not your fault." Stanley blinked quickly. "I thought I was bad." She shook her head. "You are not bad. Someone did something wrong to you, and it's good that you told your mum and dad. Now, we'll make sure no one ever hurts you again." That was the first time Stanley believed he wasn't to blame. For the next few weeks, he visited Mrs. Grace once a week. Some days he talked a little, some days he drew pictures, but every time he felt a little stronger. His parents also attended a session with her. She helped them understand how deeply children can be affected by silence, by being alone, by trust broken in the worst way. They felt guilty, but Mrs. Grace told them, "You listened, you took action. That matters more now." At night, his mother read to him before bed, just like she used to when he was younger. His father checked on him more often, asking questions, sitting with him, helping with math homework. The house felt warmer, safer, more alive. Still, Stanley didn't go near Auntie Ada's apartment again. Her door was always closed now, and even though his parents never explained what happened next, he noticed she wasn't around anymore. Weeks passed. The air changed. Stanley smiled more. He ran freely during break time at school again. He told Chica funny stories and laughed when she lost at Ludo. But sometimes he still froze when someone touched him without warning. Loud voices made his stomach twist. He often asked, "Where are you going?" Even if his parents just stepped outside. It would take time, but he was healing. One Saturday afternoon, Stanley's teacher, Miss Ronke, called to check in on him. "We miss Stanley's bright smile," she said. "How is he doing?" His mother smiled. "He's okay. Taking things one day at a time." Miss Ronke paused. "You know," she said gently, "a lot of children feel invisible when parents are always busy. Sometimes they don't say when something is wrong because they feel like no one is looking." Stanley's parents were quiet. That night, his father told him, "Stanley, you're the most important part of our lives. We didn't see what was happening, but we see you now, and we're not going to stop seeing you." Stanley nodded. "Okay, Daddy. Promise us something," his mum said, holding his hand. "Always talk to us, no matter how small it seems. You don't have to carry heavy things alone. I promise," he said. That evening, Stanley picked up a storybook and sat between them. They read together, one page at a time. It wasn't just about what happened anymore. It was about everything that would happen next. He had survived something confusing and scary, and now slowly he was learning to trust again. He was no longer just a quiet boy coming home to an empty house. He was a child being seen, heard, and protected. One evening, as Stanley sat watching a cartoon with his dad, he suddenly asked, "Daddy, do other children go through what happened to me?" His father turned off the TV and looked at him. "Yes, Stanley. Sadly, there are other children who have experienced something like that." Stanley sat quietly for a moment, thinking. "Do their parents find out too?" "Sometimes," his dad replied. "But many times they don't. Some children are too scared to speak. Others think no one will believe them." Stanley frowned. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," his dad agreed. "That's why we're proud of you for speaking up. You helped us understand how to be better parents." Stanley looked at his hands. "Can I help other children too?" His dad raised an eyebrow, surprised. "How do you want to help them?" "I don't know yet," Stanley said, "but maybe if they know they can talk. If they hear my story, maybe they won't be scared." That night, his father told his mother what Stanley said. They both sat in quiet amazement. The next day, they made a decision. Stanley's mum called Mrs. Grace. "Stanley wants to help other children," she said. "That's a very brave thought," Mrs. Grace replied. "I know just how he can begin." They agreed to let Stanley share his story during a small gathering. Mrs. Grace had been planning a workshop for parents and children about safety, boundaries, and how to speak up. It would be the first time Stanley would tell his story outside their home. He was nervous, but he was ready. The room was filled with chairs, balloons, snacks, and gentle music. Children sat with their parents. Some giggled, others whispered, but the room grew quiet when Mrs. Grace stepped forward and introduced Stanley. He walked to the front slowly, holding a piece of paper with shaking hands. He looked out at the crowd, so many faces, so many eyes. His heart beat fast. But then he saw his parents sitting in the front row. His mother smiled, and his father gave a small thumbs up. He took a deep breath and began. "My name is Stanley. I'm 10 years old. I love football and storybooks. But something bad happened to me not long ago." His voice shook, but he kept reading. "A woman I trusted, someone my parents trusted too, did something that made me very uncomfortable. She called it a game, but it wasn't a game. It made me feel scared, dirty, and confused." Some parents in the audience began to tear up. Others held their children close. I didn't know how to talk about it at first, but I told my mummy and daddy. They listened, and they helped me feel safe again. He paused. "I want to say to every parent here, please always make time for your child. Ask them questions. Be close to them. Don't leave them alone with people just because they seem kind." He looked at the children. "And to my friends sitting here, if anything makes you feel strange or scared, talk to someone. Don't keep it inside. It's not your fault." When he finished, there was silence, then loud applause. People stood and clapped. Mrs. Grace walked over and hugged him tightly. "You did something powerful today, Stanley," she whispered. "You've made a difference." His parents came forward too, wrapping him in their arms. They didn't need to say anything. They were proud, and Stanley for the first time felt truly strong. After the workshop, many parents came to speak with Stanley and his parents. Some had tears in their eyes. A woman in a green scarf knelt beside Stanley and held his hand. "Thank you, my son," she said. "Because of you, I'm going to have a talk with my daughter today. I never thought something like this could happen in my home, too." A man came up to Stanley's dad. "My boy has been acting strange lately. I thought it was just a phase. But now, I'll ask him properly. I'll listen." That evening, when Stanley got home, he felt lighter, like something heavy had been removed from his shoulders. His mum made him warm jollof rice with fried plantain. His dad let him choose the movie for the night. As they sat together, Stanley's mum turned to him. "You helped people today, Stanley." "Really?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "And not just parents. You helped other children understand that they have a voice." Stanley looked at the ceiling. "Maybe I can write a book one day." His father chuckled. "That's a wonderful idea." From that day on, Stanley's parents made a promise to each other and to their son. No matter how busy work became, no matter how full their schedules were, they would never again let their child come second to anything else. They rearranged their working hours. One of them was always home by the time Stanley returned from school. They started a weekly family night, where phones were turned off, and they did something fun together, games, cooking, or storytelling. And every evening at bedtime, one of them sat by his side to ask, "How was your day?" It became more than a routine. It became their bond. When Monday morning, Stanley walked into school feeling like a different boy. He was taller now, not in height but in confidence. He greeted his classmates with a big smile and high-fived. "Chica." When Miss Ronke entered the class, she looked at him with a proud smile. During break time, Stanley noticed a smaller boy sitting alone under a tree. His name was Jide. He had just joined their school 2 weeks ago. Stanley walked up to him and sat beside him. "Hi, I'm Stanley." Jide looked up. "Hi. You're new, right?" "Yes." They talked a little, about football, favorite snacks, and cartoons. Then Stanley asked gently, "Do you like the school?" Jide shrugged. "It's okay. I miss my old house." Stanley nodded. "I used to feel alone too, but it gets better when you have someone to talk to." Jide smiled faintly. "You're the boy who spoke at that event, right?" Stanley's eyes widened. "You were there?" "My mum took me," Jide said. "I liked your story. It made me feel strong." Stanley grinned. "You are strong." At that moment, something shifted. Stanley realized that his pain hadn't been wasted. It had been turned into something meaningful. He had used his voice, and now that voice was giving strength to others. Later that day, Miss Ronke asked the class to write a short essay. What does it mean to be brave? Stanley picked up his pen and smiled. He had the perfect answer. That afternoon, Stanley sat at his desk, pencil in hand. The words flowed easily, not like other times when he had to think hard before writing. What does it mean to be brave? To me, being brave is when you speak up even when you're scared. Being brave is telling the truth even if you think people won't believe you. Bravery is when you go through something hard, but still choose to help others feel safe. I used to think being brave was only about fighting or not crying. Now I know it's also about asking for help and using your voice. I was brave when I told my mummy and daddy something that scared me, and they were brave when they believed me and stood by me. When he finished, he looked at his work and smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt proud of what he had written, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. The next morning, Miss Ronke collected all the essays. She read them that evening and paused for a long time when she reached Stanley's. She wiped her eyes, then sent it to the school head teacher. By Friday, Stanley's essay had been read aloud at the school assembly. When the head teacher called Stanley to the front, everyone clapped. "You have taught us what it means to be truly brave," she said, "and we are proud of you." Stanley looked out at the crowd. His classmates were clapping. Some parents were visiting that day and nodded with admiration. In that moment, Stanley no longer felt like the boy who had been hurt. He felt like the boy who had made a difference. Mrs. Grace reached out to Stanley's parents a week later with an idea. "I want to start something new," she said. "A monthly children's circle, a place where children can talk, ask questions, and feel safe, no judgment, no fear." Stanley's parents agreed to help, and the school also offered its small library space for the meetings. Stanley was invited to be part of the first gathering. 10 children came. Some were quiet, some giggled nervously. A few came with their parents, who sat behind, giving them space to speak. Mrs. Grace started with a soft voice. "Today is about you. We are here to listen. You can say anything. No one is here to judge you. This is a safe space." She looked at Stanley. "Would you like to open the circle?" Stanley nodded. He stood up and faced the group. "I used to think adults knew everything," he began. "But now I know that sometimes even adults don't see everything. That's why it's okay to speak. It's okay to say when something feels wrong." He looked around. Some children nodded. One girl's eyes watered. "You're not alone," Stanley added. "And if you speak, someone will listen." The circle continued for 2 hours. Some children talked. Some just listened. But a seed had been planted, a space for truth, a space for healing. After the session, one mother came forward with tears in her eyes. "I just realized how much I've missed. Thank you for creating this space." Stanley's parents looked at him with awe. He was not just their son. He was a voice for others. Months had passed. Stanley was growing taller. His voice was changing slightly. His smile had returned fully, but now it carried a quiet strength. One sunny afternoon, Mrs. Grace received a message from someone unexpected. It was Auntie Ada. She had seen the viral clip of Stanley's school assembly online. She had seen his essay shared on parenting blogs and Facebook groups. She had heard about the children's circle, and she wanted to speak. When Mrs. Grace told Stanley's parents, they were shocked. But they agreed to listen, not for revenge, but maybe for closure. A private meeting was arranged in a quiet office at the Family Support Center. Stanley didn't attend, but his parents did. Mrs. Grace was there too. Auntie Ada walked in looking very different, her face pale, her steps uncertain. She sat down, clutching her hands tightly. "I came to say sorry," she whispered. There was silence in the room. "I was wrong. What I did to Stanley, there is no excuse. I was broken inside. I thought I was just playing, but deep down I knew it was wrong. I've gone for help. I'm getting treatment, and I needed to say this to you face to face." Mr. Paul's face was firm, but he nodded. "We don't forgive because it's easy," he said. "We forgive because holding anger can poison us. We're choosing peace, not because of you, but because of our son." Mrs. Paul added, "We hope you never hurt anyone again." Auntie Ada broke into tears. "Never, never again." Mrs. Grace ended the meeting with a short prayer. When Auntie Ada left, there was no celebration, but there was calm. Stanley's parents knew they had done the right thing. That night, they told Stanley only what he needed to know. She said sorry. "She's getting help, and we've moved on." Stanley nodded. "Okay." Then he added, "Thank you for telling me." And the conversation ended with a group hug. Stanley sat by the window one Saturday morning, watching birds peck at crumbs on the balcony. The sky was clear. There was peace in the air. His mum walked in with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She handed him one and sat beside him. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "I've just been thinking," he replied. "About what?" "About how things changed. About how I changed." She listened. Stanley looked at her. "Mummy, did I do the right thing telling you, speaking out?" She took his hand. "Stanley, you did the bravest thing a child could ever do. You stopped a secret that could have destroyed you. You helped other children. You helped us become better parents." He smiled and sipped his drink. Later that day, Stanley joined his dad in the kitchen to make pancakes. They laughed when the first one turned out too thick. He helped stir the batter, and his dad showed him how to flip it like a pro. In the evening, Stanley wrote in his journal, "Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means feeling safe again. It means knowing I'm loved. It means being free to laugh, talk, and dream again." The sun began to set, painting the sky in soft orange and gold. Stanley looked out and smiled to himself. He was not just surviving anymore. He was healing. The school's hall was filled that evening. Chairs were arranged in neat rows. On the banner above the stage, bold letters read, "Listening to Our Children, a forum for parents." Stanley's story had touched so many lives that the school and the Family Support Center decided to organize a forum, not just for show, but to start real change. Parents came in with notebooks, some with tight faces, others with curious ones. Mr. and Mrs. Paul sat in the front row. The principal gave a short speech. Then Mrs. Grace stood up and asked a question that set the room still. "How many of you truly know what your child feels when they come home from school?" There was silence. Do they feel seen? Do they feel safe? Are we listening when they talk? Or are we brushing them off with, "I'm tired. Not now," or "Go and watch TV"? People began to nod slowly. Then she told Stanley's story, without names, just the truth. By the time she finished, a woman in the crowd raised her hand and said, "I need to do better. I've been leaving my daughter with someone I barely know." Another said, "I used to think my child's quietness meant she was okay. Now I know I need to ask deeper questions." That night, something changed. Not just in their minds, but in their hearts. The school promised to start monthly check-in sessions. Parents exchanged numbers. A seed had been planted. Stanley's story was doing something powerful. It was opening eyes. By the time Stanley turned 11, the children's circle had grown. What started with 10 children was now a group of 30. Older children helped the younger ones. Games, storybooks, snacks, and soft mats filled the meeting space. Stanley had become a quiet leader, never loud, but always present. One Saturday, a boy named Daniel joined the group. He was small, shy, and barely spoke. He reminded Stanley of himself. After the circle, Stanley sat with Daniel, shared a biscuit with him, and asked, "Do you want to come next time too?" Daniel nodded slowly. From then on, they always sat beside each other. Stanley didn't ask Daniel to talk. He just made him feel safe. Later that month, Daniel wrote his own essay titled "My Safe Place." And just like Stanley's, it moved people. Mr. Paul and Mrs. Paul watched all this with wonder. Their son, once a quiet boy sitting alone after school, was now a light for others. "He's not just healing," his father said. "He's becoming someone others can lean on." And Mrs. Paul added, "Maybe that's the most beautiful thing. He's turning pain into purpose." It was a Sunday evening. Stanley sat on the living room rug, surrounded by books, games, and his parents. The windows were open. The smell of jollof rice floated in from the kitchen. His mother looked at him and said, "Stanley, we're proud of you." He looked up and smiled. "I'm proud of us too." Then his father said something he'd never forget. "You reminded us that children are not just here to be taken care of. They need connection. They need time. They need us to protect not just their bodies, but their hearts and minds too." Stanley nodded. "I think every parent should know that." That night, they recorded a short video together, just the three of them, talking about their journey. They didn't share every detail, but they shared what mattered. And they ended with Stanley saying, "If you're a parent watching this, please don't wait until something bad happens. Make time. Ask real questions. Listen without judging. Be your child's safe place." The video went viral, but more importantly, it started conversations. In churches, in markets, in living rooms. Some people cried. Some people changed. Stanley's story had become more than a warning. It had become a message of hope, courage, and second chances. And in the quiet of their home, surrounded by love, Stanley finally felt what he had always longed for. He felt safe. The end